First on stage, quite stressful, but as I say, it can only get better. Thank you, Juliet. Yes, so I joined Foster & Partners some 30 years ago. So today's presentation is really about celebrating daylight, and we're going to show you a couple of projects that influenced kind of some of my thinking about daylight and architecture, take you through some of my projects that certainly have been using daylight as a kind of a key design generator, and then complete with a most recent finished project in London as well. So, celebrating daylight in architecture. Here's a small selection of projects that the office is renowned for, where daylight has actually been central to our thinking in those projects. It has an impact on our well-being and on our focus. But let me start about this project. This is the Hong Kong and Shanghai Bank, completed in 1986. And as we see here on the left, this is one of Lord Foster's original sketches. This is how to try and get daylight and sunlight deep into the center of the building. And the idea was then to have a light scoop on the southern facade, which had a series of mirrors that was tracking the sun to allow the sun to come into and then into the central atrium by deflecting by a mirror. So for me, this is one of the first projects that I was familiar with when joining the office, understanding the importance of daylight and integrating that idea into our projects. The next project is the Commerzbank, completed some 10 years later in 1997. And this took it on to the next level. This is really about gaining daylight deep into the building, but also integrating biophilia, the landscaping, and also the idea of getting those views, that visual connection, which I think is very important. Again, these are some of Lord Foster's sketches, talking about how that visual connection from those workplaces, those double height spaces, the idea of the landscaping that is wrapping around the building, and again, really focusing on that sense of well-being, creating a place for the workers and the occupants of the office building to have a breakout space and benefit from that connection to biophilia. That connection from the inside to the outside is very much evident in a lot of our projects. So this is the first project that I worked on and to present to today. This is a hospital, a Sulis hospital in Bath, a modest hospital building, 6,000 square meters. We went back to this building quite recently. It's been finished now 15 years, and it's always great to kind of get feedback on projects. And one of the things that kind of stuck with me in the kind of feedback is that the staff there was saying that a lot of people can kind of come into this hospital then walk straight out again, thinking it's not a hospital. They think it's a hotel, which for us was a really great compliment, because the idea is to try and to reduce that anxiety for the patients that are visiting the hospital, make them feel more comfortable, make them feel more relaxed, not only when they arrive, but during their stays, helps their recovery. And this is the small atrium space that welcomes you. But another kind of story on this is that it's a very cost-effective building. It's a very modest little building. And in the early design stages, we had, one could say, a standard Foster & Partners roof light that went down one of the sides of the atrium space. But we couldn't afford that. And interestingly, by just using some very simple polycarbonate roof lights, we then created this kind of vision, this kind of atmosphere, and using the veils helped to kind of amplify in some respects the daylight in this space. And everything is organized around this atrium space. This is an atrium space that, again, very modest, and off that you have the consultation rooms and the inpatient bedrooms high up. But you can see from the materiality, very simple, introduction of natural materials, timber, helping for that connection to biophilia. But the simple introduction of the veils was very, very successful. Then moving down into the lower levels of the project, the operating theatres, again, adding daylight into these spaces for us seemed to be a straightforward exercise, but at the time, to get that through the kind of CQC, the approval authorities, was actually quite a tricky conversation. The surgeons, the doctors, the medical staff spend a lot of time in these spaces. The idea then for them to have a visual connection to the outside was really, really important. It helps them with their understanding and their connection, helps them feel more connected. And again, that adds to the experience of being in the building. But as we all know, the connection with daylight and helping with the anxiety and so forth is a really strong idea to promote. This is then the Maggie's Centre in Manchester. This is a cancer care centre. I think, unfortunately, all of us know somebody that's been affected by cancer. This is, again, a very small, modest building. And this is where people that are affected by cancer can go and get support. It may be just to have a cup of tea and a coffee or a biscuit, a chat. And it's a centre that is connected to the Christie Hospital in Manchester. And I think really learning from that experience at the Circle Bath, that connection from inside to outside, the connection to the biophilia, really helped us influence and drive the design on this. So as you can see here, the daylight is a continuation of the space from the outside to inside. The floor surface, the daylight, the timber structure goes from inside to outside. It's a beautiful space and something that we're very proud of. And again, we've been back to this building, and we're constantly in contact with the people at Maggie's. And one of the compliments that we received is that this building helps the centre staff do their job. And that's really, again, what for us is a very strong and positive feedback. It allows those that are supporting those that are affected by cancer feel at ease. Sometimes it's a distraction. I think this building means different things to different people. And I think the idea of the introduction of the timber, the connection to the biophilia and the garden, all those kind of spaces work very well together, but they're kind of bound together by the daylight that spills through the space. And the garden, and at the end of the garden is the glass house, is a kind of a unique space. I'd say that there's maybe about 30 of Maggie's centres around the UK. I think there's some there was one in Hong Kong, one in Barcelona. So these are small centres that are supporting those that are affected by cancer. And the landscaping is one of those kind of key aspects, key assets that form and support those that are visiting the centre. So at the end of the building, we have this glass house. And this glass house is, again, an extension of the building, but it's also a connection to the outside. And you can just see on the right there's a productive garden. So this is one of those spaces that those visiting the centre can benefit from and have that distraction, that kind of sense of togetherness and sense of community. And this is actually a writing group that's actually using the glass house. The glass house is a glorified greenhouse, but it means so much more than that to the people of the centre. And I think this is also, it shows you how the natural daylight and how important that is in this space. And I think one of the technical things that we learned from this project, working very closely with the landscape team, is that the specification of the glazing in this space is very important to making sure that we're getting the right UV light through to support the plants, not only make it a comfortable environment for the people and from a safety point of view, but also making sure that the right UV light comes through, which then goes on to the next project, which is the ICON project in Luxembourg. This is completed 3 years ago now. This was a spec office building built in Belval on the outskirts of Luxembourg, on the border between Luxembourg and France. And when our client came to us about this project, they wanted to do something unique. And this was before the pandemic. And one of the things that we looked at and talked about was creating a kind of co-working environment, a space where lots of visual transparency, creating an environment which encourages that kind of co-working opportunity. And the idea was to have co-working on the ground floor, and then the rest of the floors will be supported by larger and different tenants. So, as you can see, it's a few years ago now, but this is working with our client, looking at the importance of the daylight, using the VR and understanding how that space can evolve, looking at how the sun can move around. And interestingly, the visual transparency and the connectivity is something that we felt was very important, and which is then supported by the daylight coming through the roof, and also the biophilia that is a very strong design driver for the project. The client needs to take credit for this project as well, because I think because the market at the time was quite tricky and quite difficult, they decided to create a unique project, and they supported our vision for creating a unique project. And that was very to kind of, in some respects, to forego the kind of net to gross calculations that a lot of architects are troubled with. The idea is then to create a space that people wanted to go, people wanted to be in, and creating these breakout spaces, I think was really important. So this is one of the earlier visuals for the project, and you can see the landscaping that is kind of sprinkled throughout the building, the visual connectivity, the bridges and the breakout spaces. And you can see here then on the cross section how those spaces then populate the space, with a main entrance on the courtyard side and the street entrance, and the idea then we have a flow of people through that main space. Working with our consultant team and our experts, we analysed all the daylight and making sure that the daylight was appropriate. And by positioning some of the floor plates, we're able to manipulate and making sure that we're getting daylight deep into the floor. But I think going back to the lessons we learned from Maggie's, working with, again, the industry, is to understand the specification for the glazing. I think we wanted this to be very much a green space, full of biophilia, full of green landscaping, and to support that, specifying the right PVB interlayer in the glass is an important aspect. So I just wanted to kind of briefly touch on that, really, to say we've learned from that, and I think I'm pleased to say that the landscaping is thriving. I went back there last year, and it's very much, I think, supported by the benefit of having the right specification on the glazing to allow that all those right UVs to support the growth of the planting. So we can see here now the actual project, and I think let's talk a bit more about the roof light. So the roof light is actually a VELUX product. It's the VELUX modular roof system, something that we as Foster & Partners designed maybe 13 or so years ago now, I think, or maybe more than that. But it's a very simple and very effective, and I think one of the most notable aspects is the installation time on this was very, very quick on the roof lights, which I think from a construction point of view was a great advantage. It allowed us to make the building watertight very quickly. It's very, very streamlined, slimline profiles, and there are systems that you can integrate roof vents into those panels. On this project, we didn't need to do that, but you can see here it's a very, very simple, very straightforward, and very modest installation, but is very, very effective. And this is just before the occupants moved in. And again, it was a very successful project for our client. They found a tenant during construction and actually sold the building to a Belgian insurance company during construction. So from their point of view, it was a very successful project. And for us also, it's a very successful project. It's a great space. The connection to the biophilia, the visual transparency, I think is fantastic. And it does swallow 2,500 people very well. And the French bank now there occupies all of the building. So we didn't really adopt or didn't materialize from a co-working point of view, but it's been very successful in terms of being let and sold very, very quickly. So you can see here that the visual connectivity and the quality of the daylight, I think, in that space is something that allows you to have that connection to the outside and actually becomes a very attractive place to be. As you can see here, then the different levels. And it's quite interesting from an architectural point of view. We decided to keep the columns or the grid and express that grid. And I think in some respects that adds to the character of the space. It adds to the scale of the space. It had been quite easy for us to remove some of these columns and just have floor plates that are supported from below. But actually, from an architectural point of view, from a motif and from a design point of view, I think it adds to the character, adds to the atmosphere. And as you can see there, I think it's a very, very successful space. Kind of moving on to the last project, really. And this is the Floyd project, which is actually the Apple headquarters in Battersea Power Station. I didn't realize until a few moments ago, this is maybe the first time it's been presented publicly. So, and even though I didn't work on it, I do have a colleague in the audience that can answer any questions if we do have any more tricky questions later. But this is the Apple's European headquarters in the Battersea Power Station, which is not too far away from our office. And again, it takes a lot of those themes that we've been talking about earlier in the presentation, the idea of the natural daylight coming in, the kind of the light and shade, and being able to see the movement of the sun. And again, I think credit to our client on this project. They understood the benefits of that natural daylight and actually foregoed a little bit of floor area to allow a lot more atrium spaces in the kind of the axial plan arrangement of the project. But I think really the main purpose of the presentation today and to talk to you about is the artificial lighting and how that responds and extends that benefit of natural daylight. And working very closely with our engineers and the consultant team, the idea is that the lighting then responds to the daylight outside using light sensors, and it follows that kind of circadian rhythm, should we say, and allows those different light fittings to respond to the daylight. So on the perimeter, they're kind of lower levels, and deeper in the plan, there are higher levels, to extend that sense of well-being and connection to the outside. And then that follows throughout the day. So the idea is that we create an environment with that connection to the outside. The connection to well-being is very, very important. And then just really to finish off, this is a construction photograph of one of those main spaces where there is an opaque panel which is bridging across the roof. And the idea here was then how do we visually continue the connection to the sky and to the outside. So the installation of some LED panels here that are very much linked to the daylight levels and the daylight temperature of the outside. So you can see here how those LED monitor panels then are responding to the outside environment and really kind of adding to that kind of the quality of the space and to the overall atmosphere of the project. So I think maybe I've raced through that quite quickly, but thank you very much. I'm looking forward to any questions later, but thank you very much.